I've said for years that Super Mario RPG is one of Nintendo's best choices for a remake, but I didn't think it would actually happen. It seems like a black sheep among Mario's RPG adventures. Maybe it's the edgier writing and pop culture references, out of the ordinary characters and enemies, or the mere involvement of Square in development. Whatever the reason, it at one time seemed like, despite having a strong fan base who deeply loves it, Super Mario RPG might have been a product of its time. A game that would remain one of the most influential RPGs ever made, but that was where its story would end. And I was okay with that. I think the original Super Famicom version really stands the test of time. Up until recently, I believed older games which still hold up well today are some of the least deserving of a remake. Why bother remaking something when its original form is still so playable and enjoyable? But what I've learned as of late, especially playing something like Metroid Prime Remastered earlier in the year, is actually quite the opposite. Often, these games make some of the best candidates for an enhanced re-release. These games hold up because they were already so well designed in the first place. And rather than a focus on changing old design to make a game better, we've seen great results from making mostly aesthetic and quality of life changes. Super Mario RPG on Nintendo Switch exists somewhere in the middle. While it's absolutely a faithful remake, it's not quite one-to-one with the original SNES game. That blocky 16-bit 3D has now been replaced with shiny modern renders. Also added are several new CG cutscenes, helping illustrate important events throughout the story. These are beautiful, almost movie-quality animations, which is no surprise since the newly formed Nintendo Pictures, which brought us the Super Mario Bros. Movie, is credited in the game's ending sequence. But still, it's hard to say if the new visuals are an improvement. The original is a pretty gorgeous game in its own right. There's a certain charm to it that feels a little bit lost in translation. Even still, I couldn't help gawking at things like shimmering Star Hill, or the light and shadows peeking into Booster Tower. It all looks so good renovated with a new coat of paint. Gameplay-wise, there are many quality of life changes that mark a clear improvement over the original. Duplicate items now stack to save inventory space, autosave is on by default, making the previously all-important save blocks now just ornaments, but by far the biggest change is the addition of a fast travel system, which is accessible directly from the map menu, providing an instant warp to any location previously visited. I can't even begin to tell you how much of a positive change this is, since traversing the world map is easily one of the clunkiest parts of the original. There are even some all-new expansions to the game, like a bestiary providing info on every enemy type, and new content post-credits which I'm still working through and do not want to spoil. The most important changes in Super Mario RPG have to do with its battle system though. This turn-based system relies on action commands. In other words, pressing a button at the correct time during battle animations, which will provide a bonus effect. This is Super Mario RPG's signature, and something that inspired other turn-based combat systems for generations to follow. The remake has given action commands an even greater importance, as many of its new elements now revolve around this mechanic. First of all, exclamation mark prompts now indicate when the player has input an action command successfully. Now more than ever, your goal should be timing action commands as frequently as possible. For one thing, many moves will do additional splash damage when timed correctly. This is a huge help when facing off against enemy hordes, since it spreads damage around, often speeding up encounters. Not only this, but an unbroken chain of successful action commands will grant passive buffs to the party, so it really pays to get good at these. A new meter called the action gauge fills up little by little with each successful timed action. When filled to 100%, it will allow your party to perform a powerful attack called a triple move. Triple moves change depending on which characters are active in the party. For example, Mario, Geno, and Mallows hits a single enemy extremely hard, while Mario, Geno, and Peaches creates a party-wide shield nullifying the enemy's next attack. triple moves integrate themselves seamlessly, and if you didn't already know it, you would think they were part of the original combat system all along. And let me just say how they changed the Bowyer boss fight so that he now uses his lock-on on all 3 buttons at the end, making the only way to hit him a triple move, is a stroke of genius and a brilliant introduction for a new mechanic. With triple moves, it's important to strategize about which one might be the best for any given scenario, and to switch party members accordingly when the action gauge hits its peak. This added strategic element works because now in the remake, we can switch out party members live during battle. Not only does this lessen the tendency to use the same 3 characters throughout the entire game, it also adds a new layer of depth to some of the harder boss fights, which will force you to rely on your backup party just as much as the 3 characters you send in first. Enemies have unique gimmicks, from the bosses all the way to your generic minions patrolling an area, and with each fight you can expect something different. Tough guy Jonathan Jones pulls Mario away from the rest of the party for a 1v1, settling things man to man, while your regular dry bones will crumble when jumped on, only to regenerate itself a few seconds after the fight, just like how it would in one of Mario's platforming games. In addition, different enemies are weak to certain move types. For example, it's good to use Mallow throughout the sunken ship, as his lightning spells can toast many of the aquatic enemies found there. It's satisfying to recognize enemy type weaknesses, making most future encounters with the same type a breeze. Even so, I didn't find myself thinking about weaknesses and resistances all that much. When traveling through the main game, I focused on being able to clear enemy waves as fast as possible. Typically, this meant using moves that hit all targets at once while using the least FP as possible. For example, I used Mallow's inexpensive Thunderbolt spell constantly. It hits most enemies for solid damage while only costing 2 FP. And later in the game, I rushed the Flower Ring accessory onto Mario and Geno, which halves FP cost of their strong multi-target magic. Between battles, Mario will find himself in places like a mazy forest and sandy desert, all the way to more extreme locales like a kingdom in the clouds and inside a bubbling volcano. Each area is presented screen by screen, all of them having their own entry and exit points, so you'll take in this world a single portrait at a time. Areas are generally pretty small, and most players will traverse them very quickly. You might not be spending hours exploring, but this small area size means they never feel empty or just thrown in to pad out the game. Each screen has a purpose, which makes exploration satisfying. For example, the forest maze is full of hollow tree stumps, which we can drop down into to explore the caverns below. And it even features a Lost Woods style section that requires choosing the right paths forward, otherwise risking a never-ending loop. This is the type of stuff that separates a generic forest area from something much more memorable, and Super Mario RPG is full of things like this. One of the game's main quirks outside of battle is the sort of light platforming you'll have to do, whether it's timing jumps to cross a section of spinning platforms, or more random interactive moments, like charging this door in tandem with a sniffet to break into the wedding venue at Marrymore. At certain points, the game will switch gears completely to an action-oriented minigame like collecting coins at Midas Falls or riding the minecart in Moleville. These sections just pop up in the middle of the adventure, yet they're done infrequently enough that they don't feel like a chore. Super Mario RPG demands more control over your character than most other turn-based RPGs, which is actually quite fitting for one that features Mario, a famous platforming hero himself. I didn't play the original Super Mario RPG until decades after its release. I played it for the first time when I was a teenager in the early 2010s. I remember it being one of the few older games that caught my attention, a standout among the NES and SNES libraries I spent a lot of my childhood writing off. And my appreciation for Super Mario RPG has only grown as I've matured further, and my ability to appreciate more of the subtleties in video games has grown too. This time around, I beat Super Mario RPG's main story in just over 10 hours. But keep in mind, I haven't yet gone for many of the secrets and good equipment. Plus, I'm already very familiar with the game's puzzles and dungeons. Even still, this is a short adventure, especially for a turn-based RPG, but it's one that's absolutely worthwhile, if not for nothing more than the subtleties I just mentioned. You don't need me to tell you this, but it's clear this is a lovingly crafted game that's full of richness and charm. If you're a fan of this genre and haven't yet experienced Super Mario RPG, you owe it to yourself to give it a shot. Even on the other side, having cleared the game this weekend, I'm having a hard time processing that this remake is actually real.